Hey, welcome to my in-depth guide to macros, as the resources that you find online can be a whole time sink to learning how to macro. And I wanted to compile everything I've learned through trial and error and how I've made some pretty awesome macros for my characters. So let's start with the basics, the fundamentals. Macros are essentially lines of code that the game reads and implements through the chat box of the game, which is simply a console command bar. To override the chat feature, the command needs to start with a / followed by the action or command that you want your character to perform. So I'm going to show you two quick commands, and I'm going to enter them in the chat box to show you what I mean. / cast, flash heal, enter. / use, salted meat mash, enter. So essentially what those two commands do is cast is known abilities in your spellbook, while use is items in your inventory, whether it be on your paper doll or your bags. So essentially what we're doing in this console bar or the chat box is typing in a command that tells the game that you want to perform this specific action. Next thing I want to talk about is how you actually put in the command to open up your macro menu. So it's / macro, enter, and it pulls up the menu. So here, to create the macro, we're going to press new. You're going to open up a huge menu of icons. The rule of thumb is always go with the question mark. The question mark allows you to put in a line of code that will show whether or not there's an ability attached to it. And I will show you that code right now. So that code is #show tooltip. Then we're going to cast / heal. You'll see when I press save, the icon updates to my flash heal. And then when I drag it down to my bar and click it, it will flash heal. The next big thing with macros is how it's actually read. It is read line to line from left to right. So just to show you in the chat box, we're going to change this up. It is now going to say, hi, I'm line 1. Enter. Hi, I'm line 2, enter. And then we're going to hit a bunch of random stuff here that's still actually just one line of code. Save this, then we're gonna press it. And now you'll see that I said 3 things in the chat because it reads the enter, says that's the end of the line, enter, end of the line, enter. Okay, cool. So let's get down to the meat and potatoes, and let's get into some modifications. So what a modification is in a macro is making the spell do something or the item do something that it normally wouldn't do. That could be anywhere from targeted spells, where you want the spell to be targeting specific people in specific situations, to modifying a single button into multiple buttons. To show you this, we're going to start off with a @focus targeting modifier, @focus smite. And I'm going to show you how this works. So here the PvP training dummy is now my focus target, and the training dummy is my actual target. So I'm going to start attacking the training dummy, and then I'm going to switch to the PvP dummy and then switch back to the training dummy without ever changing targets. Now, why @focus macros are important when you are trying to interrupt healers or spellcasters without having to look where they are or try to find a place to click. The next modifier I want to talk about is mod shift, and then there's also mod control and mod alt. These mods are if statements. If shift is held, use this ability. If not, move on to the next. What we're going to do is mod shift, comma, @focus, end of the brackets, smite, and then semicolon, smite. That semicolon is a new line of code. So if we're not holding shift, then this line of code makes no sense to the game. So it's going to jump to the next line and say, oh, we're just casting smite. So doing the same thing here, now we're only going to press one button and smite these two targets. So click, click, shift, click, look at that. And then you could do this in multiple places. So we could also do mod control and say we want to cast a different spell. Mod control penance. So the reason that we put these all before the main ability is because it needs to do its checks. So it's going to say cast what? Is shift being held down? No. Next one. Is control being held down? No. Next one. Then smite. If you put smite before, then it's going to say cast and the next action is just to smite, so all the other controls won't work. So now let's try this again. So smite, smite, shift, smite, and then control. It's very useful to have this set up, especially when you have a lot of buttons and you need these buttons to do different things. As you can see, when I press shift, my top row here changes as I have different purposes for each of these abilities. Okay, the next command I want to talk about is cast sequence. Cast sequence is a sequence of spells that will be cast in order from beginning to end. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you a macro I've already created, which is my schism macro, and it leads into my full rotation. So just to go over what it says here in the dialog box, cast sequence, no mod, and that's my modifier. So if I'm not pressing anything, it will cast this. Reset equals 20. So 20 is 20 seconds, which is the cooldown of schism in PvP when my stats are increased. I want this to reset back to schism because I want to use schism before I start using all my other abilities. And then /target, when I switch targets, it will reset the macro back to schism. And then I have my abilities that I want to cast in order separated by commas. Schism, Mind Games, Mind Blast, Smite, Power Word Solace. The reason that I have it set up for target is sometimes these macros fail. Use cast sequence macros as rarely as you can. However, if you're using it on two abilities, that is usually fine. Or if you're using it to make sure you remember to use your abilities, like I do with my renew. So here's my macro. Mind Games, Mind Blast, Smite. Hey, one thing I wanted to mention was that I did stop using this macro while I was recording this video. I did come up with a better macro to turn all of my healing spells into a dual purpose damaging spell or healing spell, depending on who I was targeting, whether it be friend or enemy. And that looks like this on the screen. If you're wondering about the empty brackets simply says that if none of the conditions are true, cast normally as if it were just /cast spell name. These macros are called conditional macros of whether it's harm or help. Essentially, it's taking a check to see if the current target is someone that I should damage or if the current target is someone I should be helping. So as you see here, my healing spells at the top of my bar are healing spells when I have nothing targeted or when I have a friendly unit targeted. However, when I do target this target dummy, my spells do change to damage spells, allowing me to cast either or on one button. This macro has been a game changer for disc, and it would be a game changer for most hybrid classes as well, or healers that want to do more damage. Next, I want to talk about order. Order is very important when making macros, as they can have very different effects. So we are going to look at my Desperate Prayer macro. Desperate Prayer increases maximum health by 25% for 10 seconds and instantly heals you for that amount. So to get even more benefit from that percentage and have a bigger heal as well as a bigger health pool, I need to find a way to increase my health. So you can see that I have my Crimson Gladiators emblem, which increases my health. In the macro, I have it using the Crimson Gladiators emblem before casting Desperate Prayer, even though they happen at the same time. As you saw earlier with the chat, it will put the U's first. So it's going to read that I have those stats while it's casting Desperate Prayer. Now, you could do the reverse as well with a health stone and have a health stone after Desperate Prayer because you want to have as much health as you can for the 25% heal that comes from health stone. So if you're using an ability where you are trying to get as much damage out as possible, then you want to put your trinket or any buff that increases your spell damage or your attack damage to be used before the other ability. If you are familiar with Quickcast from MOBAs, this modifying macro is your Quickcast. If you've ever used an ability where you have to target the ground to cast that ability, you will find out very quickly that it is a 2-button press to use. This removes the second button press. So let's do cast, power, word, barrier. And as you can see here, I have a ground targeting icon that I have to then click somewhere in this space for it to cast. I have created a macro, as you can see here, /cast modifier at cursor power word barrier. So it's right here. I'm going to move my mouse and there it is. Now there are some issues with this macro, as if you do not have a good idea of where your mouse is, or you lose your mouse, you can cast something way off into the distance. This is a macro that I use on every character. It is the first macro that I make for every character because I can't stand double clicking. This macro works on totems, traps, the spear from warriors, ravager, blizzard, any ground targeting abilities. Lastly, before we go, I did want to mention the known spell modifier, where the game does a check to see if you know the spell and then cast that spell. This is great when you're changing PvP talents, as you can set 2 different macros to always display a PvP talent if you have 1 or 2 selected. As you can see, my spells at the bottom of my screen are changing as I change my talents. That's all for this video today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope I have more content to come in the future. Thank you.